Hello, this is Peter Falk, and you're listening to the Columbo Files on the Ludic Lounge, hosted by Antonicus Maximus and John Soares.
Hello, good listeners, and welcome to another file in the Columbo Files. I am one of your co-hosts, John Soares, here representing the Ludic Lounge. And with me, as always, also representing the Ludic Lounge, you know him, you love him, the one, the only, the booty himself, Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV. Bid a good, fine morning or evening to all those sexy beasts we call our listeners, Anthony.
A good, fine more or evening to all of you sexy beast of listeners out there.
That's probably the most convoluted one.
That was, yeah, a little bit.
But to be honest, I can't top the whole Coming Back to America reference I pulled out of my butt last week.
Oh, that was great. I was listening back to that. Just like you all were, loyal listeners, if you downloaded our last episode.
Yes, indeed. Anthony, this week we have another season 2 episode. We have 1972's The Most Crucial Game, with returning as a murderer for the second time of, I believe, 4, Robert Culp as murderer Paul Hanlon. Now, for listeners at home, you might remember Robert Culp from season 1, 1971's classic Death Lends a Hand. We're not going to get into too much of Robert Culp this episode. If you want a full breakdown of Robert Culp, you can go back to our episode on Death Lends a Hand. But I think we should give out the highlights. Anthony, do you got some highlights?
I do, John. My highlights for Robert the Stash Culp in tonight's episode is my notables, and loyal listeners listening at home, when I say my notables, it's stuff that I would have recognized him in, me being the everyday common man. So, he was in I Spy with Bill Cosby from 1965 to 68, that television show, as Kelly Robinson. He was in The Greatest American Hero from 1981 to 1986 as Bill Maxwell, and he was the voice actor for the video game Half-Life 2 in 2004 as Dr. Wallace Breen.
Also had a recurring guest star role in Everybody Loves Raymond as Raymond's father-in-law. Now, Anthony, we have a new face this week. One of 2 episodes that he makes an appearance in. We have Mr. Dean Stockwell playing victim Eric Wagner. Now, Anthony, do you know some stuff about Dean Stockwell? Because I know some stuff.
I have so much stuff on Dean Stockwell, John. Dean Stockwell
worked.
This guy worked all the way up to 2015, starting back in 1945.
Yeah, he comes from a family of entertainers. And did you know that Dean Stockwell's father, among other things, notably a lot of Broadway work, Dean Stockwell's father was the original Prince Charming in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh, no way!
Yep.
So what you're saying was that he is stocked very well.
Oh, go file that. That was bad. That was real bad.
We'll let it ride. But John, Dean Stockwell starred in my new favorite TV show that we talked about in our season 2 episode opener, Johnny Staccato. He also starred in Wagon Train, Twilight Zone, The Defenders, Burke's Law, Dr. Kildare in 1965 as Dr. Rudy Deveray. He starred in episodes of Bonanza. He starred in co-host Fathers, one of his favorite episodes, that is, one of his favorite shows, I should say, Mannix. He also starred in some episodes of Mission Impossible. He starred in the film The Werewolf of Washington as Jack Whittier. He also starred, John, I don't know if you know this, but he he was a part of a couple episodes of The Streets of San Francisco, where he did, in fact, wear a flower in his hair.
Along with Kirk Douglas. Since you so kindly mentioned wearing flowers in his hair, Anthony, I want to interject with a little tidbit about Mr. Dean Stockwell. Dude was an actual hippie.
No way.
Yes way.
Wow, that joke actually lands, John.
For once, yeah. Hopefully he went to San Francisco. Apparently in the mid 60s, he had been acting since the 40s. But when the mid 60s hit and the love generation and the hippie movement started taking way, he dropped out of the show business, became a hippie, and lived out of Topanga Canyon and became very close friends with, among others, actor Russ Tamblyn and musician Neil Young.
Oh, wow.
So they smoked a lot of grass and wore flowers in their hair.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, John, here's one little Easter egg I have for you if you're ready to move on.
Of course.
My first Easter egg of many Easter eggs just tickle your fancy, John, is that he starred in Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 1987 as Chip Kane. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Is that your limited fake Eddie Murphy laugh?
Yeah, I'm not, and I'm never gonna do it again because that was bad.
That's mine.
You sound like Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah, a little bit. It turned a little Pee Wee in there for a second. John,
just a little bit. Yes, Anthony.
Speaking of wee bit, he had a wee bit of a guest star in the movie Bonsai Runner in 1987 as Billy Baxter.
Really? I've never heard of that movie.
Neither have I, but I just love that his name was Billy Baxter because I love alliteration.
Sounds like Stan Lee wrote him.
Yeah, absolutely. He also starred in the film, and when I say star, had an appearance in the 1988 film The Blue Iguana as Detective Carl Strict. He starred in the 1988 film Smokescreen as Michael... Wow, I should have tried to pronounce this before. I wrote it down. Datalico.
That's very Italian, I guess.
I'm going to just roll with that.
Yeah, I will too.
But John, tidbit number 2, Easter egg number 2 I have for you of the night to tickle your fancy.
My body is ready.
Did you know he also had a reoccurring role in Captain Planet?
Who?
Captain Planet.
Who?
Oh, gosh. Nobody's going to understand that joke. He starred as Duke Nukem. No, not that Duke Nukem from PC gaming fame from 1990 to 1992. Me. Yes.
I didn't know there was a character named Duke Nukem in Captain Planet.
Yes. And it has nothing to do with the video game franchise Duke Nukem.
I mean, you would think that they would want to do some cross-pollination, but I understand why not.
And I went on a rabbit hole. I'm not going to share all of the rabbit hole I did on Captain Planet and the Planeteers, John, but there were a lot of famous people who did voice work for that show. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised.
The elusive man himself, John.
Get out of here. Martin Sheen?
Martin Sheen had a reoccurring role on that show. And a trivia fact about that is that every time someone recognizes him from that show, he is utterly shocked. That was from IMDb.
That's the joy of Martin Sheen, I suppose.
But enough about Martin Sheen. Dean Stockwell, John, also starred in a reoccurring role from 1989 to 1993 in the TV episodes. The TV series Quantum Leap as Admiral Al Calavici.
Funny enough, he had a couple of recurring roles in shows that were led by Scott Bakula. Anthony.
Yeah, I was about to hit a couple.
He was in. If I may be so bold to take the lead here, in addition to Quantum Leap, he starred in an episode or two of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, Air Force One, the Harrison Ford picture where he's president of the United States.
Get off my plane.
What are you doing on my plane? Get off my plane. I hope this gets picked up by the mic.
Ben! That was like
I told you.
I know, that was the one time Harrison Ford yelled in acting.
Yeah, pretty much.
It scared the hell out of me.
He also had a recurring part in the Tony Danza Show, the Drew Carey Show, Star Trek Enterprise with Scott Bakula again, the remake of The Manchurian Candidate starring Denzel Washington, episodes of Jag. He had a major role in Battlestar Galactica, the revamp as character John Cavill, and one of the last roles of his career was in NCIS New Orleans opposite Scott Bakula again. Anthony, there's also a couple of other things that I believe you missed early on. He was in the A-Team, in episodes of the A-Team.
Oh, I did miss that.
And the Legend of Billie Jean, which is a really bad cult movie. He was in episodes of Miami Vice.
Wow, I missed a lot.
More importantly, though, Anthony, he was in Dune.
He was in Dune?
He was in the David Lynch film Dune as Dr. Wellington Yue.
Dune! Dune! John,
Yes, Anthony.
are you ready for my next Easter egg about Mr. Dean Stockwell and a role that we missed? Well, I did miss, but you neglected to mention that I'm going to tickle you with.
I think I might. I have one role that I haven't mentioned written down. Is it his role in an animated feature?
Why, yes, John.
If I may be so bold to steal your surprise, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Dean Stockwell had a voice role in the animated picture Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, where he played the old man Tim Drake, the replacement Robin.
Yes, and that was me going to tickle you.
I am still tickled, though. Only you can tickle me like that.
Fair enough. Speaking of tickling, Dean Jagger's in tonight's episode as Walter Cunnell, and he tickled his way in Hollywood all the way back in 1929. That's an awful transition. Now,
yeah, he started it. He had a lengthy career, but a lot of this stuff that he was in, I didn't really recognize. I'm going to be quite honest. There was a movie he was in, a Western called Rawhide, and I mistook that almost for the Clint Eastwood TV series that made Eastwood's name. But no, it is a Western that is just similarly titled Rawhide.
Yes. So, 1935, he starred in Car 99 as Recruit Burton. He starred as the titular character Brigham Young in the film Brigham Young in 1940. And as you previously mentioned, John, a lot of movies in the 1950s. A lot.
Yeah, he worked constantly. TV wise, he had parts in The Twilight Zone, episodes of The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, episodes of The Fugitive, Bonanza, The Partridge Family as well, opposite son of former guest star Jack Cassidy, David Cassidy. The show that was stolen from Bruce Lee, Kung Fu, the TV series of Shaft. He also had a part in Bruce Lee's last movie, Anthony, or last American movie, I should say, Game of Death.
As Dr. Land in 1978.
Yes, he was also in The Waltons. Good night, Jim Bob.
I forgot the
is that the right show? I don't know.
Could be.
I'm just going off VH1 trivia that I absorbed in high school.
And speaking of things we absorbed in high school, John, he also starred in Gideon's Trumpet. Do you remember that one from our senior year of high school in our government class?
Yes, I do. I also remember Gideon's Trumpet from law school because we go over that whole story in criminal law.
That makes sense. And
criminal procedure, I should say.
This film was a Henry Fonda vehicle in 1980. It was a made-for-TV movie, essentially, and it's a story of Clarence Earl Gideon and his fight for the right to have publicly funded legal counsel for the needy.
Yeah, it's invoking your constitutional right under the Sixth Amendment, if I recall.
I trust you.
To have counsel present or appointed to you if you can't afford.
Well, John, as the Ludic Lounge's legal advisor, I wholeheartedly...
I'm not official, so take everything with a grain of salt.
One thing that is official, though, John, is that he finished his acting career in 1985.
In St. Elsewhere.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Speaking of moving elsewhere, we move on to Susan Howard as Shirley Wagner in tonight's episode. Not too much, John, for Miss Shirley Wagner, a.k.a. Susan Howard.
Yeah, I do have some interesting tidbits about her, though. She's from Marshall, Texas, which is relevant for her later career. One of her early TV shows was The Monkees.
Hey, we're the Monkees!
It means we're monkeying around. I don't know the words to their silly songs.
Pretty much.
But they sounded like that. She was also in The Flying Nun.
I did, and I put an exclamation point because it's The Flying Nun!
Oh, God. I still can't believe that's a show.
Yes,
I still can't believe
it was a show.
Now, Anthony, she had a part in Star Trek, the original series.
Yes, she did, John. 1968's episode, Day of the Dove, as Mara.
She is, Anthony, an important figure in Star Trek history because she is the first female Klingon and the first female Klingon to actually have speaking lines. Ain't that something?
That is something. Thank you, Susan Howard.
I would say something. I would say something in Klingon, but That would probably get us an E.
Kerpla!
I mean, I'll allow it. She was also in episodes of I Dream of Jeannie, Ironside, The Virginian, Bonanza.
Wait, hold on. Before you keep reading this,
yes.
I'm just going to do the theme song to I Dream of Jeannie in the background as you're reading it.
That's not distracting at all. Holy crap, it's happening.
Dun, 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 dun. She also starred in the Rockford Files and also in Petrocelli as Maggie Petrocelli.
And also in Mannix, The Mod Squad, Mission Impossible, Barnaby Jones, The Love Boat. And this is honestly the role that she is best known for. The TV soap opera, another favorite of my dad's because he watched it. Because, I mean, there was nothing else on, I suppose. Dallas as Donna Culver.
Yes. And did you know she also directed some episodes of Dallas, John?
I did not know that.
Yeah, I believe
Good on her.
I think she directed 2 or 3 actual episodes of Dallas. She is credited as director.
Cool. Good for her. It's always good when an actor gets to direct.
Absolutely. And her character on Dallas, John, is Donna Culver Krebs.
Thank you.
And also, she finished up her acting career in 1993's Come in the Morning as Constance Gibson.
I believe she's still alive, but I think she's retired from acting.
Yeah, I just don't think she acts anymore.
Yeah.
And speaking of people that had a lot of work, John, Valerie Harper in tonight's episode is Eve Babcock.
Yeah, she began her career as a dancer on Broadway and then evolved into acting roles. Some of her roles on Broadway put her opposite Jackie Gleason and Lucille Ball, among a whole mess of other people's, Anthony.
And
she also
rubbed shoulders, John, with a lot of who's who back in early TV.
I mean, you know, I saw her this week. I wouldn't mind her rubbing my shoulders.
I'll allow it.
I would like to take that back.
No,
I would like to take that back.
That was a good one. She starred in the Mary Tyler Moore Show as one of her most notable works, John, 1970 to 77 as Rhoda Morgenstern or
Morgenstern.
Later Rhoda Gerard, I think, because she got married in the show, if I remember. And then there was a spinoff that I did not know called Rhoda, and she played obviously the titular character from 74 to 78.
And there's a movie follow-up called Mary and Rhoda where she reprises the role opposite Mary Tyler Moore again.
John, now this next one that she's also known in, I am very intrigued to read this to you because there is some drama going on.
Really?
But before I get to that, Valerie, to the TV show Valerie and that drama that ensues, she also starred in the movie in 1984, Blame It on Rio as Karen Hollis and episodes of The Love Boat. And now we get to Valerie as she played Valerie Hogan from 86 to 87. Now, John, she got fired like in between the first 2 seasons because Valerie Harper herself fought with producers over creative direction of her namesake series. And then she sued the producer to make sure that the studio could not use the name Valerie going forward for the show. So the producers changed the name of the show after 2 seasons to Hogan Family and kill off her character in like a car accident, kind of like they did with 2.5 Men most recently.
With Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, exactly. And so as soon as that happens, she gets into another show in 1990 called City, and it was put right up against Valerie / Hogan's Family to see which people preferred. So it was like, you know, one was on NBC, one was on ABC. It was like the battle of the shows at that point. And it barely edged out Hogan Family.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, me.
Absolutely.
TV drama, man.
And she also starred in the TV series The Office. No, not that one. It was a TV show in 1995 as Rita Stone.
She was also in episodes of Melrose Place, Touched by an Angel, which is an old favorite of my mother's, Sex and the City, That 70s Show, Desperate Housewives, a recent show, Drop Dead Diva, Hot in Cleveland.
John, how could you miss Family Law, a 2001 show where Tony Danza did not play a character named Tony?
That feels blasphemous.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
I mean, it's like Tony Curtis playing somebody other than Tony Curtis.
Okay, yes. Segue.
Spartacus. I'm a desperate housewife, Spartacus. Will you be my drop dead diva, Spartacus? I'm Tony Curtis, and I'm hot in Cleveland, Spartacus.
Hey, let's take those two broke girls and let's go get a sub.
We'll go down to Giovanni's and get the favorite the noodle weenie dog, Spartacus.
Oh, that place is good. I heard it, as told by Ginger. I heard it was good. And then Melissa and Joey, bada bing, bada boom. They knew it.
I'm sorry. We
These
just
are the show within the show, loyal listeners at home, that John and I just do for each other.
And it broke me. Oh, don't edit this out. Oh God. She also had voice roles in The Simpsons and American Dad. Funny enough, I got a bit of trivia for you, Anthony.
Please tickle me.
Do you know how she met Mary Tyler Moore?
How? Did she throw her hat in the air?
Close. She met her on the set of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Oh, I love that show.
Her then husband, Richard Shaw, was guest starring, and he brought her along, and that's where she met Mary Tyler Moore, and the rest is history.
God, I love that show.
There's a reason it's a touchstone. It created sitcoms as we know it. I mean, that show is so fundamental that Marvel Studios, the producers of WandaVision, consulted with Dick Van Dyke so that they can accurately portray a proper sitcom.
That is fantastic.
So, I mean, we'll talk about it more, I think, when Dick Van Dyke actually shows up on this show, which is going to happen.
Yes. Soon.
Very
and
soon.
Speaking of people that are coming up soon, James Gregory came up as Coach Rizzo in tonight's episode. Now, for those loyal listeners who have been following us since day one, you'll recognize James Gregory from our episode of Short Fuse, where he was the victim.
This is his second of 2 episodes, so we will not be seeing Mr. Gregory again after this. But again, his film career started in '48. He had a very notable career in World War II. TV-wise, he was best known for episodes of Star Trek, the original series, The Fugitive, Ironside, Hawaii Five-0, Mission Impossible, Quincy Emmy, where there was
murder.
And his most notable role was in Barney Miller, which was the Brooklyn Nine-Nine cop comedy of its day.
Yep, and he was also in Manchurian Candidate in '62 as Senator John Yerkes, and he was in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, if you remember, loyal listeners at home, in 1970 as Ursus.
Now, Anthony, can you remind me who was in Planet of the Apes again?
Oh gosh, Charlton Heston, John.
That's right. Hello. I am doing a ham-fisted transition just to work in Charlton Heston. Thank you for humoring me. Goodbye.
Oh, God. People are going to hate us.
Oh, I know.
Speaking of people that we don't hate, John, Val Avery is in tonight's episode as Ralph Dobbs.
Please tell us more about Ralph Dobbs, Anthony.
Well, we talked about Val Avery in Deadweight, that episode in Deadweight.
Yes.
So I'm going to give a short notable works list. He was in The Magnificent Seven, the original, in 1960 with Ewell Ball as Henry. He was in the Amityville Horror in 1979 as Sergeant Gianfrido. Oof, that was a ham-fisted way to say that.
I thought you were going to talk about Giovanni from the Tony Curtis bit again.
I should have. That one way better. He also starred in the Sylvester Stallone vehicle in 1986, Cobra, as Chief Hallowell. And did you know, John, fun fact, so they call Sly Stallone Cobra in that movie because his name is Marion Cobaretti.
Hey, how you doing? They call me Cobra.
Marion? Is that you, Marion?
I told you. My name's Cobra. You call me Cobra because I fight the fight.
This is only for you.
And then another notable work that I'm going to end on is in 1977's Donnie Brasco as Traficante. And tonight's episode, John, was directed by Jeremy Kagan, written by John T. Dugan, and the score was by one of our favorite ones, Dick Denabictus.
Yeah, and De Benedictis again is doing fantastic work, and we'll get into that. John T. Dugan, or Duggan, however you pronounce it, is a returning writer. Unfortunately, he ain't one of our favorites because he was the writer on Deadweight, Anthony.
Yes, he was.
And if you want more information on John T. Duggan, you can go back to our episode on Deadweight. Our director this week, Jeremy Kagan. Columbo was his third directorial credit, Anthony.
Wow, so this was early on in his career.
Very early on in his career. He directed the sequel to a Paul Newman, Robert Redford movie, The Sting. He directed The Sting too.
Whoa, original. Electric Boogaloo?
Yeah. I mean, they broke it. They break danced in the 40s. It was great. He directed the YA movie, The Journey of Natty Gann, starring Meredith Salinger. He directed episodes of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Another old favorite of my mother's. He directed episodes of Ally McBeal, a couple episodes of The West Wing, and his last directorial credit was in 2017, Anthony. He directed a drama called Shot, which involves the lives of a married couple and a young man who get weird after a gun accidentally goes off. And drama ensues. That's all I have on the crew this week, Anthony. Do you have anything else you want to add?
The only thing I want to add before we jump into Act 1 proper, John, is the episode description I grabbed from the DVD. Murder is the game, and Columbo must figure out who's calling the plays in this exciting episode.
I think it's time to get into it, Anthony. Let's get into Act 1.
So, John, the episode opens at Stock Footage Stadium.
Yeah, do you know where this stock footage comes from, Anthony?
Where does it come from, John?
The first Super Bowl.
No way.
Yeah, so I think for the majority of the shots come from the first Super Bowl. Outside of, I think, some of the more obvious stage setups, and maybe the football players. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the crowd shots are from the first Super Bowl game.
And speaking of crowd shots, we get a nice shot of Robert Culp entering the stadium, sporting the most manly yet awful handlebar mustache ever, John.
In the most 70s, maroon burgundy. Ron Burgundy. He's Ron Burgundy. He's dressed like Ron Burgundy. Let's just call it like it is.
Don't speak ill of that sick red suit. That was an amazing suit.
It was, but he looks like Ron Burgundy.
I don't care. He is Ron Sexy Burgundy in that red suit. It almost makes up for the awful mustache.
I mean, he, as awful as it is, he's rocking it.
He is. And we see him go into his press box where there's an assistant, person in there. And we learned that Robert Culp's name in tonight's episode is Paul Hanlon. And Paul Hanlon calls Eric Wagner after paying off the assistant guy to just go take your girl out on the town and get out of my face because I got some murdering to do.
Yeah, he just needs to establish his alibi that he was alone in the owner's box, which owner Eric Wagner does not use because he does not give a damn about sports.
Yep. So we find out that Paul Hanlon essentially is like the general manager, assistant owner, or whatever for this Los Angeles football team, who he ends up calling the owner, Eric Wagner. And Eric, we find, is like a young playboy. And essentially, we find he is in midst of a hangover from a rockin' groovy party, John. Yeah,
indeed. And I got to say, one, I'm impressed that he keeps the phone in a drawer just so he doesn't have to deal with it. Two, I really appreciated the way Hanlon confirmed that Eric Wagner was alone. It's just like, but you're by yourself, aren't you? Or something along those lines. I thought it was a very subtle way to work in a proper dialogue sequence, just to establish between the characters, hey, this guy is by himself. So
yeah, it was cleverly crafted for sure. And right after he gets off the phone with Eric, tells him, I'm going to be at your place at 5 because we have a plane to catch to Montreal because we're buying a hockey team.
And be sure to jump in the pool to get yourself sober. You got to do some laps in that pool, so go jump in that pool. I wonder why he wants him to jump in that pool, Anthony.
Oh, because maybe it's just a great way to cure a hangover on a nice sunny LA day.
Yeah, that
But
makes sense.
John, Paul then calls Coach Rizzo, and god damn, Coach Rizzo is dressed to the nines in that suit coat, man.
Yeah, he is ready to go. The game's about to start. And he tells Rizzo, hey, I don't like what you're going to be doing. You're going to do, things my way, which apparently contradicts something that they had talked about prior to the episode's events, where Rizzo and Hanlon had agreed that Rizzo would do his own thing. Now Hanlon is backtracking that and wants to talk to him at halftime.
And John, we find out that the LA football team is the LA Rockets because apparently John T. Dugan did create a franchise mode in Madden.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you can only get so creative, I imagine, when you're writing these things. Can we do a quick backtrack, because there was another interesting dialogue thing that caught my attention in the conversation with Wagner and Hanlon. We get a little bit of exposition that Wagner's deceased father had all the interest in expanding his sports empire. He wanted the world's biggest sports empire, and his son has no interest whatsoever. Also, Hanlon calls him kid, and he gets really miffed at that. And by he, I mean Wagner. What I appreciated, even though Wagner threatened to fire him, and him being in again, Hanlon still calls him kid. He's like, my son, my kid, don't listen to me. And it's just like, I appreciated the brazenness of Hanlon to just keep doing what he's doing, because he doesn't care what Wagner thinks. And I also think that it establishes that there is some familiarity between the two, and that he's comfortable in pushing Wagner's buttons.
Yes, indeed, John. Moving on, Paul essentially screams at the coach on that telephone call we were just talking about previously. Screams at him saying, hey, I want to meet you at halftime. You better be in my press box in the owner's suite, whatever you want to call it, by halftime, where we can go over the second half. And then Paul dresses as a vendor, so he screams at Coach Rizzo, John, and then he screams for ice cream and goes in his ding-a-ling ice cream truck.
Yeah. After a very manly shirtless scene by Robert Culp while he's having that conversation. Because, boy, he's in like Johnny Carson shape.
Yeah, I can't get over the stash. I can't get over the fact that it's called ding-a-ling ice cream. Like, what is going on?
I can't believe, who thought of that name, for one? That's just, weird. I also had a question, how did he just take the truck? But I think we can put a pin in that, and Columbo will tell us about that later on. So he takes this truck, he sneaks out during the national anthem. He has gloves on now, and he has a car radio. He has a little handheld radio, and he takes the ice cream truck and drives across town, and he's listening to the game while he's driving, so he can keep track of it.
And John, just for more, background information, the LA Rockets are they're playing football against the Pioneers?
Or was it the Gladiators? I couldn't figure out the names of these teams, man.
It was the Pioneers, because that's what they announced, because I wrote it down and went, what? And we're getting, cut between Robert Culp driving away in his dingling ice cream truck back to the game where the Rockets just are terrible.
Terrible. It's a terrible first half. Absolutely terrible. So I called this whole sequence a lot of football and car shoe leather, because it's a lot of football playing and a lot of car driving while you're listening to football playing. It's just, we have to get from point A to point B.
And speaking of going to point A, point B is where he, meaning Paul, pulls over to the side to a payphone, and we get this weird extreme close-up shot of Paul using a payphone. It was like a track shot, but it completely zoomed into the payphone booth. And I was just shocked by that.
Yeah, and a couple things. One, that phone booth looked like it was in a weird place, man.
Yeah, it was in like the middle of the highway, like just in the middle of nowhere.
Made no sense. It's just like, is this a residential area? Is this a highway? I don't know. So he tries to call twice. The first time it's busy, and we get a brief scene of Eric Wagner ordering liquor by phone, which I didn't know you can do. And I guess that just shows you how much of a drunk he is.
And how rich he is to where he can just place an order for anything.
Yeah. And then the second time he calls him, he gets a hold of Wagner, and he keeps the radio on and is to simulate, he's listening to the commentary in the booth while he's watching the game. And the purpose of the phone call is to apologize for the conversation that occurred earlier in the day and offer him a ride to an airport because they have to go to Canada because he wants to buy a hockey franchise to honor Eric's father's wishes to get this big giant franchise.
Yep. And so he gets off the payphone. He goes back to his I love this scene, John, so much. He goes back into his Mr. Dingaling ice cream truck. And there's a little kid. Mister, I want an ice cream cone.
Mister, don't leave. I just want to buy some ice cream, mister.
And you can just all but see Robert Cole give this kid the finger as he like speeds away from this kid.
I mean, he might as well have, to be perfectly honest.
It was amazing. It was amazing. But we get Paul driving up to Eric's house, and the music, all of a sudden, John, I don't know if you caught this, just gets super sinister.
Oh, yeah. No, I really enjoyed the buildup of the music here. It's a great job by De Benedictis. It's ominous. He's using like this, that slow, I don't know what instrument it is, but it's just this like bass building, slow buildup. And it's just really, really good. It's really good. He pulls out a big old chunk of ice from behind his dingaling. You want the nose?
Oh, that caught me way off guard. Oh,
you're welcome. He pulls a big ice chunk out of from the dingaling truck, and he doesn't park by the Wagner house. I guess he scales up a hill with this ice chunk, and he comes across Eric in the pool, and then he takes his ice chunk and brains him with it.
Yeah, and honestly, that impressed me because I think, in my personal opinion, this was the most creative murder weapon that we've gotten in Columbo thus far. Thus
far, yeah, because I mean, the ice all he's doing is setting up a fake drowning by knocking him out and having him flip over, and then just he gets to dispose of the murder weapon easy because the water will just melt it.
And this is where he thinks he has the perfect crime set up, but then he sees that he has left footprints on the outside of the pool.
So he takes a garden hose and sprays down the pool or the area around the pool to just cover all of his footsteps with water. He also takes off his shoes and just walks barefoot, which, I mean, I know the bare feet and wet socks wouldn't stay around long, but I mean, you don't know how long it would take a body to get found. So maybe it could have sticked around for a long, or stayed for a period of time. But I mean, melting.
That's neither here nor there at that point.
Yeah, it would just dry up at some point.
So we have Paul leaving the murder scene, John, and we're getting a cut scene like in between, kind of like we had earlier, of Coach Rizzo, because the game is at halftime at this point. Coach Rizzo going up into Paul's office, but it's the way they did it, John, was beautifully directed, in my personal opinion, because it still appeared that Paul was driving to the stadium, and Coach Rizzo was going ever so closely into the office to where Coach Rizzo enters the office, and we go, oh, crap, we never got a shot of Paul entering back into the stadium.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of doubt as to whether or not he made it on time. Also, before we finish out the scene, I just want to note that he casually eats an ice cream bar while he's driving back.
I forgot about that.
And it's just like that's just a baller move. Like you murder a guy and you got to go back to establish your alibi, and you're just going to enjoy an ice cream. Like, good on you, pal. Good on you.
Nothing comes in between me and my ding-a-ling.
I love you, buddy.
Oh, Oh god, this is a fun ass episode.
A lot more fun than I was expecting. This was kind of a frustrating one for me, but so while we didn't get that establishing shot of Paul Hanlon walking back from his dingling,
Or parking his dingling, if you will.
yeah, he parked it in the rear.
Did he? Never mind. I'm not going to go there.
Oh God.
I'm trying to keep the E. I'm trying to keep the E off the episode.
And I'm just ruining it. So we didn't get the establishing shot of him coming back in. It looks like he had made it back in time. He was just using the restroom, according, at least from Coach Rizzo's perspective. He says that he called
Hold on
Rizzo
a second.
on the field phone, though.
So we
Yes.
never got a shot of the dingling coming into the stadium?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
No, but I understand your confusion. I'm sorry, loyal listeners. I had to throw it out there. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll continue.
Oh, continuing. So he drops the whole issue that he had established with Rizzo on the phone on the pregame. Says it's your show, do what you need. He only needed to have Rizzo there to establish, oh, I met him at halftime. He was probably there the whole time.
Yeah.
And at that point, we get a very odd close-up of Paul Hanlon's face as he, I guess, enjoys getting away with murder or thinks he does.
I couldn't even tell the emotion he was portraying in this close-up, but we get the close-up and it fades to black. And speaking of fading to black, John, I think it's time for Act 1 to fade into black as we jump into Act number 2.
So, Anthony, Act 2 opens with Columbo at the scene, kind of. He's sitting in his car at the scene listening to a football game. And I just got to say, I enjoy Columbo just, enjoying a nice game of football.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And we tell right away that Columbo really has something invested in this LA Rockets versus the Pioneers football game.
Yeah, he's paying very close attention to what's going on and is very excited or disheartened when something bad or good happens.
Personally, in my humble opinion, I think he's got money riding on it with like the police chief or something.
Or his wife.
Or his wife.
I would imagine he does a lot of bets with his wife. So the liquor delivery man discovered Eric Wagner and tried to bring him, resuscitate him, but to no effect. And a neighbor also saw the body and was in a panic. We don't really get to interact with them. They just get told. We just get told about them, and they get their statement is taken, but we never have a direct interaction with either of those individuals. And Columbo is met by a uniformed officer, and the officer tells him the assistant coroner is waiting for him. They're ready to go. They're ready to move the body. The coroner says, "This is an accident. I've seen it, 1,000 times. There's water all over the pool. He probably slipped, bumped his head, either coming out of the pool or coming into the pool or diving off the board. There's it doesn't matter where it came from. He just fell, hit his head, and drowned. That's
Essentially,
it.
they're like, look, it's Sunday. Can we just write this off as an accident so I can get back to my party? And then Columbo's not even paying him any mind. And I really appreciate this interaction because he's being a dick to this medical examiner, John.
Yeah, and the coroner examiner is being a dick to him.
Yeah, they're just like going back and forth. Columbo's not even listening. He's paying more attention to the game. Now, John, you mentioned the police officer who was fully dressed, who was giving him the rundown of exposition.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch his name, not the officer name or the actor name, to do a little bit more background research, but he sounded like somebody who was super familiar. He also sounded like a young Danny Trejo. So I don't know that for a fact, but he's going to be forever known as Officer Young Danny Trejo.
I'm just going to call him Juan Trejo because he's the first one. He's the first Juan.
Oh, God, file that. That was
bad.
bad.
Yeah, I would like to take that back.
But something we can't take back, John, is Columbo tasting the water in the pool versus the water that was on around it.
Yeah. So, right before he does this, he's talking with, I believe, the uniformed officer or another officer. There's no house servants. There's no witnesses outside of the liquor delivery man and the neighbor. Apparently, there had been a party the night before, and that leads Columbo to just walk into the pool, and then he gets his shoes wet, and is very frustrated by that. And then he tastes the water, which I think is weird at first, and he seems very concerned about it. And something in it clicks, and we'll have to put a pin in that because Columbo brings it up later. But something about the water doesn't sit right with him. And we also learned that Eric Wagner threw this party while his wife was out of the country.
Yeah, so there's something going awry in that household.
Yeah, the nature of their relationship is interesting to say the least. Though I think we don't get much of that in this episode, to be quite honest. So after all of this, Columbo says to the uniformed officer, or no, not to the uniformed officer, the other detective who had arrived on the scene and had been questioning people before Columbo arrived. Columbo ordered full forensics around the area, around the house, around the pool. Tried to figure out if there was like a gardener or a pool service, because he noted the freshwater hose that had been used, and there's fresh water around, not chlorinated water. And with that being said, Columbo decides, he's heading off to the football stadium for whatever reason.
And upon going into the stadium, he essentially we're gathered to believe that the game is over because all of these football players are going into the locker room, and Columbo goes in the locker room where he goes to find Coach Rizzo to inform him that, Wagner's dead.
You jumped a scene, Anthony.
Oh, did I?
You did. There was a scene.
That's right, with Paul.
Yes, we get our meet cute, as it was, between Columbo and our suspect. So Columbo makes his way up to the owner's box and doesn't immediately identify himself, and Hanlon just dismisses him. This is a private box, please leave. And then Columbo identifies himself as an LAPD homicide detective. And I got to say, Robert Culp does some good acting work here as being, surprised here. He turns down the radio and talks to Columbo. We learned that Mrs. Wagner was out of town on a charity event. And then Columbo starts talking about, the pool. Is there a pool service? Do they work on Sundays? Well, no. Well, it doesn't make sense. There's water around the pool, but it's fresh water. And that's when we learn why Columbo tasted the water. I don't know how he knew the difference and whether or not the water had mixed enough, but apparently the water at the walkway of the pool was, not tainted enough by the chlorinated water of the pool that he could tell, oh, this was fresh water and somebody used the hose.
Yeah, and essentially, as soon as he mentions that when he hints that it's a murder, we have Paul turning off the radio completely.
And he's very, very silent. It's literally like Columbo tells him all of this stuff about the pool, and he does the thing with the radio, turns it off, and it's very quiet. And then Columbo just gives him a look.
Yeah,
just like,
odd.
What? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And then Columbo goes on to theorize exactly what Hanlon did, which was, somebody got the garden hose and tried to wash down their footprints, and then it got mixed with the water, but they were trying to do it so that they could make it a clean getaway. Funny that, huh?
Pretty much. And that's when Columbo goes to meet Coach Rizzo in the locker room. And
yeah,
essentially he fills in Coach Rizzo, telling him that Eric's been murdered. Rizzo is obviously heartbroken because he's been with the father for many years, and now with Eric for so many years as the coach of the LA Rockets. That still just sounds weird to me.
And we learn more about the nature of Eric Wagner's relationship with his father. His father apparently was very domineering and demanding, and in Rizzo's own words, somewhat of a disappointment to his father, because Eric's father wanted him to be a quarterback, but his life took him to more scandalous points of his life. He was more concerned about partying and doing weird stuff with who knows whatever, and then they get talking about Paul Hanlon, And he's known for being a little bit, harsh and got a little bit of a temper, which is kind of typical for a Robert Culp character. And Rizzo tells Columbo how, Hanlon wanted to meet him at halftime, and he made this big stink before the game. And then, by the time he got up there, he just brushed it off, and it was not an issue. And we get more background as to how Paul Hanlon got into the position that he's in, Anthony.
Yeah, essentially, he got into that position because he came in with the LA Rockets under Eric's father's regime, where he was just I think he said he was a scout or a talent scout or something of the like. And essentially, once Eric's father passed away, Eric took over ownership of all these sports teams, but he needed somebody to do the day in, day out stuff because he knew nothing about sports. So he appointed Paul to essentially become the assistant owner, or essentially everything but title owner, of all these franchises.
Yeah, I would say a general manager. And Columbo insinuates that maybe he set himself up for that. And Rizzo says, no, that's not the case. It was, it was given to him because he earned it. He can be a frustrating individual, but everybody likes him. Nobody would want to do anything to be against him. He hasn't done anything. He's a good manager. He does good work. Unsure, and he's unsure. Yeah, Rizzo's unsure about anybody who would want to kill Eric Wagner. At that point, we go to our next scene, Anthony, at the Wagner house. And Anthony, I gotta ask you a question. Do you recognize this house by any chance?
It seemed awfully familiar, John.
Boy, I wonder why that was. Do you want to know why, or do you know why?
I do want to know why, John.
This house was Ken Franklin's house, Anthony, and Murder by the Book.
Of course it was.
Yeah, except no mail was being opened. But what's being brought in is all kinds of funeral arrangements, and Paul Hanlon's secretary doing work at the Wagner house to get the funeral underway. At which point we meet Cannell, the lawyer to Eric Wagner, and his father prior to him. And I got to say, there was a little bit of decent exposition here. It's like, why? I am Eric Wagner's lawyer. I was his father's lawyer for 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. And then Columbo enters the scene carrying one of these funeral arrangement flowers or floral things, and then instantly gets dismissed by the secretary there, saying, "Okay, you can leave now." And Columbo's like, "No, I'm with the police. I'm trying to get a hold of Paul."
I gotta say, it's another instance of Columbo just being a gremlin, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, hi, how you doing?
Yeah, and I love the interaction where Columbo meets with Walter and just asks him, like, "Hey, where can I get a pair of those shoes? How much did that set you out?"
Do you want to know another fun fact?
Yes.
That was an ad lib by Peter Falk.
No way.
Yeah, he just made that up. It's just like, how much you pay for those shoes?
What a great ad lib, because it brought the scene. It made the scene for me, John, honestly.
It's just the wonder of Peter Falk, man. It's
the
absolute magic of Peter Falk. So Paul Hanlon and Cannell have some bad blood here, Anthony. They're not really on good terms with each other. And Cannell is frustrated that he didn't learn of Eric's death directly. He had to learn via the news. And Hanlon is just like, go ahead.
I was saying, while that interaction's going on between those two characters, Columbo keeps hearing this odd buzzing noise, this odd, like, ringing, buzzing, and he's looking at the stereo behind him, trying to just figure out what's going on.
Yeah, they're playing some kind of music, and he something about it is just throwing him off. And then one of your favorite things happens, Anthony. Columbo gets a phone call because he left it. He told the police department, "I'm going to be here, so call me here." And I got to say, in addition to that, Hanlon is just very short with everybody right now. He's not taking any calls, doesn't want to take any calls. He doesn't have time to answer questions. And Columbo, gets new information. He gets new. I guess the lab reports came in. Nothing really showed up. At that point, we don't really know. Columbo asked about an autopsy, which was to occur, was as part of routine investigation, but we don't know the results immediately. And then Hanlon takes off and says he's going to talk to Columbo later. At which point we go to, I'm assuming LAX, but some airport in the area, and a plane is landing. I'm guessing we're there. Columbo. We see Columbo in his Peugeot. Columbo is, trying to get into the airport, and he gets into the airport. And there's a little bit of airport shoe leather.
Yeah. No TSA though, John.
No TSA because they don't exist. They won't exist for another 50 years. At this point, I presume that he was just there to try and meet Mrs. Wagner. Turns out that's not the case because he goes to the phone booths, and who does he happen upon, Anthony?
Mr. Paul Hanlon.
I had a feeling that's how that was going to end.
Yeah.
Hanlon is making a very suspicious phone call, and I just got to love the line. It's like from Columbo. It seems like a funny place to be making a funeral arrangement.
You see, you mentioned like a couple seconds ago, John, that you assumed that Columbo was going to meet the missus there. I assumed he was following Paul because he knew something was up.
I mean, there wasn't enough information as far as I knew, considering that, Columbo didn't immediately leave after Hanlon. So it's like, did he follow him? I don't know. From what Hanlon tells us, he says that the phone call was to cancel his appointment in Canada to buy that hockey team. And Hanlon, I got to say, Culp does a great job here, just being short with Columbo.
Every question Columbo, like you mentioned, Columbo being a gremlin, he is just short. He's getting pissed, and he's like, dude, I'm here to meet the missus. Get the hell out of here.
Exactly. And he also says, I chartered her a flight. That's why she's not on any of the airline lists. And I got to say, I love that escalator shot of them just talking, coming up the escalator.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. And Columbo starts asking Hanlon about the nature of the Wagner's marriage. And according to Hanlon, they're at a point where Shirley Wagner understands that her husband is a giant horny child.
Yeah, pretty much.
And honestly, she, according to Hanlon, deserves better. And well, even though he loved Eric like a brother, he didn't deserve, the relationship, which is something that frustrates me because, Columbo mentions figuring out, motive in this scene. It's like, there, and to be honest, motive is irrelevant in establishing, intent for murder. This is premeditated murder. What Paul Hanlon did, he clearly wanted to kill. He wanted to kill, so he did it.
Yeah,
his motive is irrelevant outside of establishing reasonable doubt.
Well, John, it's funny that you mentioned motive, and I guess this will be the place where I mention my tidbit is. I was going to say for final thoughts, but I like how it naturally transitioned here. I, at this point, can't figure out a motive as to why he even wanted him dead. Because for the most part, he had him in his pocket. He was going to go on the plane to Montreal to make more money to make the franchise. And it's not like if he were to be dead, it's not like Paul was going to take over the entire business anyway. So I can't even establish a motive as to why he would kill him out of just, I guess this is where, because we Columbo and Paul see Mrs. here, Miss Shirley, and they're hugging and she's crying and stuff. If they could have thrown a line and established like they're having an affair between themselves or something, then I'm like, okay, there's a motive here. There's a love affair. And that's going to be the motive as to why he wants him killed, so he can get out of the way, so he can actually marry this woman. But that is never established either in this episode.
Yeah, and we get nothing, to be honest. Just to to be a little bit forward about it, We get nothing as to why Paul Hanlon did this. We just know that he did it.
Yeah. Besides the fact that it's Robert Culp and he'll be the bad guy this week.
Yeah, and you'll just be cranky. Also, Columbo, to walk back to what's going on in the scene. Columbo reveals that the autopsy revealed nothing new. There was head trauma and drowning.
Right.
And Hanlon says, something had to have happened with one of his hippie girls, and they, caused an accident or came back. I'm guessing he's alluding to, maybe they pulled something like the Tate LaBianca murders by the Manson family.
Right.
But Columbo says, no, we looked into it, came up empty. But what's interesting is that around the time of death of Eric Wagner, about 2:30 or so, somebody reported a Dingling ice cream truck in the area. And what's funny is that the Dingling Ice Cream Company, they said that they don't have a route there, from what Columbo found out, which is funny.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, interesting. And Columbo also brings up, hey, the field phone that you said you called Coach Rizzo on, there's no record of you actually calling him during the first half. And Columbo says, or Hanlon says, that's not really my job now, is it, to establish whether I called or not? It's like, no, sir, it's not. It's mine.
Yeah, but that line that he delivers, that Culp delivers, that's not my job, is just with pure venom. Just
yeah, it's another perfect example as to why Robert Culp just rage so flippin' well.
Yeah, and then John,
yes,
Mr. Wagner is there, meets up, and essentially Columbo kicks rocks. He gets on out of there, and then we go later in the night, and there's a prowler at the wagon.
This was an interesting scene.
Yeah, and then the prowler's met by just a cute dog.
So at this point, what were you thinking? I thought it was just a burglar, and it was maybe that somebody that Eric knew or somebody knew, because the dog is just way too friendly.
Yeah, and I didn't even know it wasn't established that Eric had a dog. So it's just, I'd like to think that it was just a stray dog that came into the scene, and they're like, just keep it in, it's fine. And so, and because of that, Val Alvaro was like, well, I'm gonna at least pet the dog because it's here.
Yeah. And then this guy, I'm just gonna call him a burglar for the time being. He starts messing with some phones at Wagner's desk, and then the camera moves to show Columbo just sitting in the dark like a boss.
Oh, this scene is probably my favorite scene in this entire.
Yeah, and then he spooks the PI. A uniformed officer keeps him in, under control, and Columbo starts, trying to figure out, it's just like, who are you? We just need to see your wallet. We learn that he's a private investigator that somebody hired. We don't know exactly who. And Columbo says, that I heard the static in the radio when I was here earlier today. And that's a sign of a bad installation of some wiretaps. So who are you working for, buddy?
Yeah. And essentially he's like, look, I have the right to not mention my employer's name. And Columbo just instantly hits him back, not missing a beat. Yeah, well, I have the right to arrest you for breaking and entering.
Yeah, and illegal wiretapping. And I'm glad you brought this up, because honestly, this felt like the Columbo from Prescription Murder in some ways, because Columbo's just calm, he's smooth, he's just cool as a cucumber. It's just I know we don't get this Columbo a lot, but to see him in action like that, God, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
and it's just it shows the versatility of Peter Falk.
Yeah, he's not taking any of the crap of this PI, this private investigator. He's like, no, look, you're gonna give him up, or I'm gonna book you, and I'm gonna take away your license, and you're not gonna be able to work ever again.
Yeah. So what's it gonna be, pal?
Yeah.
At that point, the scene, we don't know what happens. Then we get a scene transition to a gym where some basketball players are playing, Anthony, and you know some stuff about them basketball players?
Yeah, they are the Los Angeles not Lakers.
Because they really are the Lakers.
And Pat Riley's there.
Yeah.
Laker great Pat Riley and Laker coach great Pat Riley from the Showtime Lakers of the 80s. And now the pretty much assistant general manager or general manager, what huge guy in power of the Miami Heat.
And I got to say, man, Columbo is tiny next to these guys.
Oh yeah.
He's so tiny. So apparently Paul Hanlon is here doing press. I guess this basketball team is owned by Wagner. And before he talks to Hanlon, Columbo talks to somebody in the stands. It's just like, where'd you get those shoes? And the guy says Miller's on Wilshire, which is still open, by the way.
Is it really? Oh my God, it's amazing.
If we ever do a Patreon, one of the goals is just, when shit is open again, we'll go buy shoes at Miller's on Wilshire. So Hanlon gets a phone call before he talks to Columbo, and he is pissed off because apparently Columbo got a search warrant and went into the Wagner house and Hanlon's office, and he explains why, or Columbo explains why. He found, based on my experience, I noted that there were some wiretaps in your phones. I needed to figure out who did it, and I did find out. Apparently, this private investigator had tapped these phones 2 weeks ago, and 2 weeks worth of conversations between you and Eric Wagner have been recorded.
Yeah, and again, this just speaks to how great Culp does as being pissed, because he is just livid at this point. He's like, "Yes, let's go find this person who did it."
Yeah, and it's a convincing kind of pissed because at first he's pissed off at Columbo.
Yeah.
And then when he has more information as to, there's more to what he did than I knew about. And then there's another layer to it with what we find out later, towards the end of the episode, which makes the performance a little bit more convincing because Hanlon always knew.
Yeah. But John,
yes, Anthony.
One thing that I know is that we're at the end of Act 2. So let's dig into Act number 3. So Columbo and Paul run over to Eric's place to find out that Walter is the one who bugged the phones, John.
Walter Connell, the lawyer of the Wagner family. In a very great walk and talk, we get all of this information that Connell had paid and gives this information freely to Columbo. He had paid the private eye, and he was trying to figure out some stuff on Paul Hanlon and was trying to protect his client.
Which I don't understand, because he's not trying to protect. He wasn't trying to protect Eric. He was trying to protect Mrs. Shirley.
Yeah, he
I couldn't.
The problem is that he mixes up things so much about why he's doing what he's doing, and it's like we don't get enough between him. Like we don't get anything with Connell and Wagner to start this off. We don't get anything with Connell and Mrs. Wagner to establish that he has anything, personal to do for these people.
Yeah, it essentially, I felt like they could have trimmed this a little bit and just fast forward to the part where we're getting to where, again, with a weird transition, where they're hearing the recorded tapes.
But before they do the tapes, Columbo mentions something to Paul Hanlon, Anthony.
Oh, that's right. Thank you for.
Yeah. So, Columbo says, I got bad news. I checked with the Ding-a-ling again, and, they revised their statement to me. They said that they do have a route in downtown Los Angeles. And silly me, I forgot that downtown in Los Angeles would include the stadium. Huh.
Yep.
So, I mean, that means a truck is going to be at the stadium. And that means, there was one seen at the time of Eric Wagner's death. So, Mr. Hanlon, can you tell us where you were again? Can you establish, that you were in your press box the whole time?
Now we really have to find a witness to corroborate Paul's alibi. Essentially, Columbo tells him.
Yeah, which, I mean, they do between with Coach Rizzo, but I mean, that's a little shaky at best. So now we get to the conversation that was recorded, and we get Cannell's reasoning for why he hired the PI. He said that he felt Hanlon was manipulating and pushing the Wagners, and Cannell was trying to protect them and get Hanlon out of their lives. A good example of this is, yes.
I was just gonna say, John, but it was just like okay, so he's trying to ruin their lives by expanding the sports monopoly they have. Like I don't.
I mean, I think the one example that actually supports what Cannell is trying to get at is the whole implication that that Wagner gives Hanlon when they were first on the phone, that Hanlon introduced Wagner to some chick, and that chick brought her sister, and then they had sexual escapades, the three of them. And that means Hanlon had done something to cause Eric to do something foolish at the expense of his wife.
But again, this lawyer supposed to be protecting Eric's interest or Shirley's interest or the monopoly sports team's interest? Like I couldn't understand the.
As an attorney, his client would be Wagner. So his former client was Eric Wagner's father, and then when his father died, it would then go to, I would presume Eric hired Cannell just because of the familiar relationship, or the prior business relationship. So his loyalty would be to his client, and even if he has to tell his client, this is a hurtful thing, yes, you slept around with some loose women, and your buddy Paul gave them to you, but you got to do right by your wife and stop doing that stuff and stop letting Paul egg you on and be a better man. I think that's what he's trying to do, but he's mixing personal stuff with professional stuff.
Yeah, I guess he's just blurring the line between professional boundary. I guess
maybe.
But it's not clearly stated. And that's what was bugging me, and it goes back to like the motive of the killing, essentially.
And it's I think your frustration with Cannell is due to the fact that we don't really get much with him outside of that first scene we see him in, and this scene.
And then he's gone.
And then he's gone. He's gone. Honestly, there's probably a version of this where you cut out Cannell, focus on establishing some kind of affair between Mrs. Wagner and Paul Hanlon, and I think you have a much stronger episode. Now, Hanlon explains what he meant, what was meant by chick. Apparently, Eric was looking for a new maid, and Hanlon told him about this agency. And I guess this new maid brought her sister to help, which sounds like a whole load of hooey to me. But
yeah, it was just, I was like, okay, move forward. Let's go. Let's just move forward at this point.
So we get they play. That's from the first conversation. They replay the second conversation that was recorded, and from what we know that this is Paul Hanlon calling from a payphone while on the road. So this call was was recorded by the PI at 2:29 p.m. and that establishes that Paul Hanlon, at least in his opinion, because it's the alibi he wants, Paul Hanlon was in the owner's box at the stadium right at the time of death. So there's no way he could have been in two places at once. And Mrs. Wagner gets very frustrated and kicks everybody out because she's just, And I think there's more credit to what we think should have been done with them having an affair, because she kicks everybody out except Paul. And Paul is getting very physically, he's holding her and making sure she's fine.
Yeah, he's very, very, very protective. She's like clinging to him, just like is just hurt by everything going on, and he's being very protective. Again, that to my point, it's like, subplot, dude, they're having an affair, stronger motive, boom, there you go.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we don't get that.
But what we do get, John, is Ralph Dobbs meeting Columbo at like a restaurant. at the pier or something.
I mean, it's cool looking.
Yeah, it was.
I wouldn't mind going there to get a bowl of clam chowder, but it certainly doesn't look like anything I've seen. So Dobbs shows up, trying to talk to Columbo. He needs his license back. He needs his equipment back because Columbo took them from him. And Columbo just, Columbo says it himself. I forgot about it. To Columbo right now, what Dobbs wants is the least of his concerns.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Columbo's just listening to the conversation recordings and is just trying to figure out where the hell Hanlon was. Something about the conversations are bothering him. He can't figure out what's bothering him, but he knows something's wrong. And, he starts asking Dobbs, well, how'd you install the bugs the first time? And he said, I didn't install the bugs the first time, which Columbo goes, huh, really? So who did? And Dobbs withholds that information for the most part because he just doesn't want to give up, confidential information. But he does say that he used a young woman who was a part-time operator that was hired into Hanlon's office as a secretary. And then while she was on an errand for Hanlon to the Wagner house, that's when she took the opportunity to install the bugs. And then was funny enough, fired 3 days later.
Yeah, odd.
Yeah, and this was mentioned way back at the beginning of the episode when we first meet Cannell with the news secretary saying, oh, Miss Babcock was fired 3 days ago, so I'm just kind of playing catch up here. Which, Columbo goes, huh, Mrs. Babcock, something's interesting about her. And speaking of Mrs. Babcock, Anthony, we come upon her in her apartment getting all dolled up.
Yes, we do. And just a classic Columbo, embarrassed scene, essentially.
Yeah, because she's she's dressed to the nines. She looks great. Columbo knocks on the door and she says, I've been expecting you. A mutual friend told me about you, and we're going to go dancing and we're going to do dinner.
Columbo's like, wait, mutual friend? What? You knew I was coming? What? Dinner? No, I don't have time for dinner.
It's like, what are you talking about? And then, she's like, Columbo says, oh, Mr. Dobbs told you. He's like, no. And then another gentleman knocks on the door, and I get the implication is she's supposed to be a high society escort.
Yeah, some sort of sex worker. It was kind of hinted at for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. It's 70s TV, so they're just kind of alluding, just dodging the point. I just got to say though, I love Columbo revealing himself as a LAPD detective. Right. And both of them literally just crapping themselves.
Yeah. So the John essentially announces himself as Cincinnati. Like the weirdest alias of a name to do. And then Columbo goes, oh, Cincinnati. Yeah, I have a cousin there. And then she's like, oh, so Cincinnati, this is my cousin. And Columbo's like, yeah, Columbo, lieutenant at the LAPD. And the John just freaks out and goes, Miss Babcock about those stocks. I'll call you for them, and just leaves.
Yeah, it's one of the best comedy bits we've gotten so far in Columbo, as far as my opinion goes. So the John leaves. Columbo and Mrs. Babcock have a conversation, and Columbo just wants to know one thing. It's like, I'm not here for anything else. I don't care what you're doing. Yeah. It's not my problem. My problem is, why were you fired from Paul Hanlon's office?
And you know what, John? I really appreciated this scene. I really appreciate Columbo going, look, put your appointment book away. I don't need to see that. I don't need to know what you're doing. And it shows that Columbo's given this person some leeway. Because any other cop might have been like, well, I'm going to book you for prostitution, and really hit over the head. He's like, look, your business is your business. I'm just trying to solve a murder.
Yeah, and he's just like, and he doesn't use it as a threat. No. To get her to talk, and he doesn't need her to fully talk. I mean, he just gets her frustrated, and she snaps a little, and her voice changes. She has an accent now when she didn't have an accent before, and Columbo notes that. And he says, I got a cousin. or a nephew, and he married a young woman from Hungary, and she sounded a lot like you, beautiful like you too, huh? I mean, what? And then he I guess he calls her by her real name, which
which I didn't catch either, to be honest with you. But it was the name that was announced where the new secretary said, "Oh, Paul, this Miss Hungarian last name is trying to get a hold of you."
Rosnitsky or something like that.
Yeah, it was something. I didn't write it down, to be quite frank.
Yeah, Columbo calls her out on that, and just he doesn't push anymore, and just essentially tells her, maybe somebody's threatening you. Maybe you with these bugs, somebody knew about these bugs, and somebody's trying to tell you, force you to do something about it or not do something about it.
Right.
I don't know. That could be a possibility, but I don't know. And then he leaves, and lets her stew on that.
And then we get a weird scene where just Columbo's at the ball stadium, just sitting in the stands, just like pondering, I guess.
I wouldn't call it weird. I kind of call it fantastic, because it's just like it's the cog scene, I guess. Part of me just loved it. It's just like Columbo's just thinking. He's just wandering and thinking. It's just like, okay, how did he get out of the stadium? Well, he found okay, this is where the ding-a-ling truck is. This is probably where he went. But now how does he get from the press box to down there? Yeah. And what am I missing from here that would establish that he's either not here or here?
Yeah, in a rare occurrence, buddy, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that, because I was just like, this is a weird 3-minute scene where just Columbo's going, just like sitting in this stadium seat. So it was just odd to me. I didn't feel like it fit.
Okay, I get what you're saying, but you can agree that the shot of that zoom in on him just sitting in the middle of all those empty seats and him just looking up is baller.
I gotta agree to disagree, buddy. Like in a rare occurrence,
killing me smalls.
In a rare occurrence, loyal listeners, John and I do not agree on this particular scene.
I mean, write to us. Let us know what you think.
Hashtag Team Antonicus.
Hashtag John is right.
Oh, God. Well, after this weird scene of Columbo having an existential crisis in the stands, we go to this next scene where Columbo goes to the travel agency that Paul normally books flights with. Okay.
And this is an interesting scene because, Columbo, the travel agency, the travel agent, I should say, just asks, hello, where would you like to go? And Columbo just goes, home.
And he just looks miserable. He's like hunched over on the counter, and he's essentially like grumbling that his feet are killing him because of the new shoes that he finally bought.
And then, he's trying to figure out whether Paul Hanlon actually booked a flight to Canada. Because if he can prove that, then maybe that's something he can show that he didn't intend to go to Canada and he was actually trying to intend to stay and kill.
Or if he only booked like one ticket instead of two or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So while he's waiting for the agent to look up the information, another agent in the office is listening to the football game. And they get into a conversation about, the game and all that. And then Columbo just listens to the clock. And the clock chimes at a certain time of day. And Columbo starts thinking, there's a clock in Paul Hanlon's press box. That's a funny little bit of information, isn't it?
Yep. And that's his eureka moment, as I like to call it. His aha. And that's like, this is where I nail him. And
yeah, this one honestly was a little bit better than some of the other ones that we've gotten, as far as I'm concerned. Because it's not as ham-fisted as the one in, Blueprint for Murder was.
Yeah, I was thinking of the one Blueprint for Murder, sure.
But from this travel agency office, we go back to the press box, and Columbo shows up with a leather bag in hand, and Paul Hanlon is just watching the new football game on this Sunday, in a very, very fine suit. And he turns down the radio again,
Not all
but
the
not
way
off.
Not all the way off. Just turns it down.
Yeah, and Columbo noticed that from last time when he told him about, but then when he told him about the freshwater, he got quiet and he turned off the radio. I wonder why.
And this time, he mentions that this is an actual murder, and he turns off the radio entirely again. And Columbo notices, and he goes, "There he is again, turning off the radio."
And then Columbo starts telling him about a Mrs. Babcock, or her real name, Miss Rosninsky, or something along those lines.
Something along those lines, right?
So, and to be honest, I felt like Columbo was really taking a risk here because he at this point he hadn't gotten anything solid from Miss Babcock. She didn't give him anything. All he has is an assumption based off of a conversation.
Right.
So what he's doing here with Hanlon is ballsy.
Yeah, and essentially he's like, well, this is why you knew that the phones were tapped and you needed that conversation to be recorded, and that's why you left and went to the airport to have that conversation with Mrs. Babcock to make sure that you were having a conversation, telling her not to talk because you needed a phone that was not booked.
Yeah, and so at this point, Columbo replays the recorded conversation that we know Hanlon had with Eric at the payphone. And Columbo explains, for the longest time, I was trying to figure out something that would prove that you were not here, like a airplane or a cop car or something. But it's not that. It's the opposite. He needed to show something that should have been there but wasn't.
Yep. And then he tells Paul that he just so happened to show up to this football game at the same time that the recording was done.
Yeah, 2:29.
Yeah.
And then what comes after 2:29, Anthony?
2:30, John.
Yeah, what happens at 2:30?
What happens at 2:30 is that the clock inside of Paul's office chimes.
Yep, but it doesn't in the recording. So I guess that's how he nails him?
Yeah, that's pretty much how he nailed him. And then, but he nails him. But we don't get a confession or anything like that. We just get Robert Culp looking aghast, and we see the tapes spinning, and then end of episode.
Which was a great close. I love closing on the spinning tape, but
and the soundtrack in the background's great too. Like the score,
yes, was great.
The score's building up as Columbo's building up, because Columbo is just like throwing this assumption after assumption in Robert Culp's face, and boom, 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 boom. But yeah, it's just there's a chime in the office, not on the tape, so I guess that makes him the murderer.
Yeah.
But John,
Anthony,
why don't we touch upon these thoughts and maybe some other thoughts in our last segment that we so lovingly like to call
just one more thing.
Excuse me, just one more thing.
John, one of my final thoughts for tonight's episode is, simply put, motive? ?
I mean, yeah. Like, let me put it like this. I have a lot of specific training. So, I have a lot of information, but when it comes to the legal side of this, what Paul Hanlon did and what most people do is first-degree murder. And you establish first-degree murder by proving specific intent to kill with premeditation and deliberation. And you don't need much time to premeditate a murder. It could be a second. It just has to be a decision. I'm going to kill this person.
Fair.
And we know Paul Hanlon did that. What I think is missing from this is more context as to why. So you don't need in a court of law, you won't need motive to necessarily prove that he committed the act. It certainly helps, but there's just so much missing here,
John. But
quite honest,
in the court of the Ludic Lounge, which obviously is the highest court amongst the entertainment industry, you need motive to create a good murder story plot.
I think you would need it to show at least deliberation or premeditation if you follow the rule I set down. Sure, that's, I think, one of the fatal flaws of this episode, which is we just get a murder. We don't know why, and we never find out why. And Columbo even mentions figuring out motive, but even he doesn't get that.
Yeah.
We get, honestly, I think we get really, really solid performances.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone's great in it. Robert Culp's
Yeah.
great. Coach Rizzo's great, whose name's escaping me at this moment.
James
Gregory's great. I mean, Val Avery's solid as Ralph Dobbs in this. Everyone's solid. It's kind of piecemeal. And the murder itself is brilliant. It's smartly written. I appreciate that because it's a great murder, right? It's just everything in between.
Yeah, it's missing a couple of steps, and I think that, notwithstanding the great performances here, I think we probably could have done. It's either you throw out Cannell altogether,
right,
or involve him more early on and get more stuff with Shirley Wagner.
Sure,
because she's only in the scene as just a crying dervish, and that's it. We don't get anything. We don't get anything establishing that she has a significant relationship with Paul Hanlon. We don't. Yeah. We only get lip service to what her marriage is like. And I think you and I talked about it before. If you give an affair to Paul Hanlon and Shirley Wagner, then maybe you get something a little bit more. Or if you just get Paul more frustrated at the fact that Eric doesn't give a damn about the sports team that Paul Hanlon is literally giving all of his time to.
Yeah. Or here's how you make it a little bit better. You use Walter, the same plot. Yes, I tap the phones. And you do that so he could catch Mrs. Shirley in the act because he's looking for Eric Wagner's best interest. And he catches her in an infidelity plot with Paul Hanlon. And there you go. And then they use that, even though, you can fight on a legal basis how illegal it would be, but you could do like an easy split. And because of that split, Paul Hanlon himself feels like he has to off Eric so nothing could happen or something to the like, right? Like that's just kind of sloppily thrown out there in these last couple of minutes. I thought it out, but something to that regard. We're like, okay, these all make sense. And now we have motives.
Yeah, it's a cleaner story than what we're given. I mean, I think we're given a decent story. It's certainly better than Dead Weight. I think it's more entertaining.
100%. Like this was interesting. Like I had a good time with this episode. I don't want the loyal listeners listening at home to think that I'm poo-pooing on this episode and that I'm, the Dead Weight's crappy entrails that it was. This was a great episode. I enjoyed the interaction. I enjoyed it all. I'm just saying, like, to make it like a top 10 or a top, the top of the top, it needs to kind of tie these things a little bit better, make it a little bit more plausible.
Yeah, and to be quite frank, this is ranking down very low for me because it just, some of this stuff just doesn't feel thought out, and it's just like we're wasting really great performances on a very ultimately subpar story.
Yeah, I like Robert Colton in his first Death Lends a Hand because at least that makes sense. He's just a super angry guy. He smacks her, she falls, she hits her head, it's dead. Like at least it's not premeditated, but you still
an accident. Yeah,
you still have a storyline to it that makes general sense.
Yeah. So Anthony, I think we've hit the end of our final thoughts and just one more thing, but I have a few more things. A couple shout outs this week, Anthony. We got some emails in the last few weeks from a John R. out of Cleveland, Ohio, and then Andrea M. Didn't tell us where she was at, but they wrote in some fan letters, and we always appreciate our listeners sending in some fan mail. And we always appreciate your thoughts and always welcome good feedback and good commentary and good references. And speaking of good things, Anthony, we have another review.
What?
Yes, on iTunes. We were given a 5-star review not too long ago by lovely, good listener of the show, Jen Zuko. She writes, as a big fan of the Scottish guys, who unfortunately I'm not familiar with, and a listener of the other 2 Columbo podcasts all the way through, I was as bitter as a cup of the Lieutenant's black coffee at seeing there was yet another one. How delighted I was to be proved wrong and to find John and Antonicus plowing through each episode with such joy, aplomb, research details, and eye-rolling impressions.
Yes, they are eye-rolling. We admit that.
And at which point I apologize.
Except for Adam West. This is my only truly fantastic one. Good listeners.
She goes on to write to say, I am as fond as listening to them as Columbo is of his chili, with or without the beans. Variety. Thanks, gents, and carry on. And to you, Jen Zuko, we would like to say thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate your kind words, and we appreciate you listening. And I know I speak on Anthony's behalf as well. So we just want to say thank you all. And that brings us to a close on this file this week, Anthony.
The last thing I want to say, John,
Yes, Anthony.
is go Rockets.
Go Rockets. Now for Antonicus Gluteus Maximus, I have been John Soares. This has been another file in the Columbo Files, and we just want to thank you, good listeners. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Boo, Pioneers!
What?
Hi, this is Peter Falk, and you've been listening to an episode of the Columbo Files, hosted by the Ludic Lounge. And just one more thing. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Ludic Lounge, Anthony at RojoLoco44, and John at just_John_0891. Or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com.